Before I tell you this story, I need you to ask yourself something important. Have you ever watched someone be treated like they were worth nothing just because they couldn't fight back? Have you ever stood in a room full of people who saw the abuse happening and said nothing? Have you ever been the one who was silent? Because in the mansion of Chike Anderson, one of the wealthiest and most respected men in the city, silence was the rule. The cooks were silent, the cleaners were silent, the drivers were silent. Because when the woman standing beside a billionaire raises her hand to strike you, silence feels like survival. But then a quiet girl walked through those mansion gates. A girl who had come only to earn money for her sick mother. A girl who had never planned to be anyone's hero. A girl named Amaka. And when that same hand rose to strike her, she caught it. She caught it in the air in front of everyone. What happened next changed everything. Stay with me, because this story doesn't just end with one brave girl. It ends with justice for the dead, with secrets that come back to destroy the people who buried them, and with a man who almost married the worst mistake of his life, saved by a maid he barely knew. If this story already has you feeling something, hit subscribe. More tales are coming, and you don't want to miss them. The mansion sat at the top of a long private road. Iron gates, manicured gardens, 3 floors of glass and marble that shimmered in the morning light. From the outside, it looked like a dream. From the inside, it looked a little different. Chike Anderson had built his fortune the hard way. Years of discipline, sacrifice, quiet grinding in rooms where nobody noticed him until suddenly, everyone did. He was the kind of man who remembered where he came from, who treated his staff well, who said good morning to the gate man by name. And then there was Clarissa. Beautiful, polished, the kind of woman who knew exactly how to hold a wine glass and exactly how to smile at a camera. She had entered Chike's life at the right moment, at the right event, with the right dress and the right words. And Chike, who had been alone for long enough, had let himself believe. But the staff of that mansion knew who Clarissa really was. They had learned it quietly, one incident at a time. A slap for a glass left on the wrong table, a shove for an answer she didn't like, a scream in someone's face for walking too slowly down a corridor. They tolerated it, because the bills at home don't care about your dignity. Because when you have mouths to feed, you learn to look at the floor and breathe slowly and wait for the moment to pass. And then Amaka arrived. She came through the side entrance on a Tuesday morning, small bag over her shoulder, quiet eyes taking in every corner of the place. Her mother was in the hospital, surgery coming, bills already stacking up like unpaid prayers. She had taken the job not because she wanted it, but because she needed it, and she had made herself one promise before she walked in. Nobody was going to put their hands on her. The first few days were quiet. Amaka learned the rhythms of the house, who to avoid, which corridors Clarissa walked at what times, how to become invisible without disappearing entirely. She watched, she listened, she worked hard and kept to herself. And then one morning, Clarissa woke up and announced that her diamond bracelet was missing. The accusation moved through the mansion like a storm. Clarissa did not ask questions. She did not investigate calmly. She moved from room to room, staff member to staff member, pushing, grabbing, shouting, her voice sharp enough to cut. This was not a woman looking for a bracelet. This was a woman who had been looking for a reason. She slapped the cook. She shoved the young cleaner against the wall. She grabbed the gardener's shirt and screamed into his face. And then she turned to Amaka. The room was completely still, every person in it holding their breath, every eye watching. Clarissa raised her hand, the same hand that had struck others, the same hand that had never once been stopped. Amaka caught it. She caught it in the air, her fingers wrapped around Clarissa's wrist like something unbreakable, firm,
unyielding, calm. Clarissa froze. She had never felt this before. No one had ever stopped her. And Amaka looked her in the eye and said nothing. She didn't need to. This silence said everything.
What Clarissa didn't know, what nobody in that room knew, was that there was someone standing in the hallway, watching, listening. Chike had come back to the mansion early, a meeting cancelled at the last moment, a driver who had taken the fastest route. He had heard the shouting before he even reached the door. He had stood in that hallway, briefcase still in hand, and he had watched his fiancée walk her way through his stuff like a woman who had been given permission to destroy. And beside him stood Mama Tise, his mentor, the woman who had guided him through every major decision of his adult life. She was watching too, her face still as still could be, the kind of still that comes before a verdict. Chike had heard about these stories, small things whispered to him by trusted staff who hadn't meant to tell him but couldn't hold it any longer. He had pushed them aside. He had told himself Clarissa was passionate, high-strung, that she would settle once they were married. Now he was watching it with his own eyes, and there was nothing left to push aside. He was still standing there, frozen between the life he had planned and the truth crashing through it when the knock came. Not a knock, a hammering, loud, furious, the kind of knocking that carries years of waiting inside every blow. The gates had already been pushed open before the security guard could react. A tall man walked through the courtyard with the posture of someone who had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times and was finally here. His jaw was set. His eyes were dark with something old and unresolved. He stepped into the main hall and stopped. His name was Samuel Okoro. And when Clarissa's eyes found his face, the woman who had just stood down an entire household of staff dropped to the floor.
Guilt has a very specific weight. You can carry it for years, pack it down, press it flat, cover it with newer things, but the moment the right person walks into the room, it rises back up. Chief Benson, Clarissa's father, had been standing at the edge of the room when Samuel entered, and the color that left that man's face in that single second told the story more completely than any spoken word ever could. He already knew who Samuel was. He had always known this day might come. Chike looked at him. Who is he? Quiet, controlled, but the kind of quiet that means the question will be answered one way or another. And Chief Benson broke. The confession came out slowly at first, then faster, the way confessions do when they've been caged too long. Years ago, before Clarissa had ever met Chike, before the polished surface, before the practiced smile, there had been another maid in another house. A young girl, quiet like Amaka, working hard like Amaka. Clarissa had accused her of stealing jewelry, not because she believed it, but because she could. Because the girl had no one powerful enough to argue back. Clarissa had hit her hard, more than once. The girl had fallen. Her head had struck the edge of a table, and she had not gotten back up. She died. Samuel's sister, the only person in his family who had believed that working hard in someone else's house could be a path forward. She had been 22 years old. Chief Benson had paid for silence, had used connections to bury the incident, had told his daughter to forget it and move forward. And Clarissa had moved forward remarkably well. Samuel's family was poor, too poor to fight, too broken by grief to know where to even begin. So they had waited, and Samuel, the boy who had grown into a man inside of that waiting, had never once stopped looking for the moment. That moment was now. Drop a comment below. Whose side are you on? I read every single one.
The room was frozen. Chike stood at the center of it all, The accusations against his staff, the crumpled woman on the floor who was supposed to be his future, the broken father in the corner, the fury in Samuel's eyes. He had always trusted his own judgment. He had built a life on it.
There are moments in a person's life that split time clearly in half, before and after. The self you were and the self you become once you know what you now know. For Chike Anderson, standing in his own living room on what should have been a normal Tuesday, this was that moment. He looked at Clarissa for a long time, not with rage, not with the kind of emotion that needs to shout, with something steadier. Grief, maybe, for the future he had imagined, for the years he had given to someone who had been counting them like currency. "I forgive you," he said, slowly, deliberately, "but I cannot protect you from the law, and I would not try to even if I could. This wedding is cancelled, and what you answer for now, you answer for alone." Samuel stepped forward. His hands were steady. His voice was steady. The voice of a man who had waited so long for this that he had learned somewhere along the way to carry it without breaking under it. "My sister's name was Amaka. She was 22 years old. She worked hard and she believed people were mostly good. She deserved better than what she got. And today she will finally get it." Clarissa was escorted from the mansion by the police within the hour. Chief Benson followed, facing his own legal consequences, the ones he had been outrunning for years. They left the way the guilty always leave, heads down, the weight of what they'd done finally heavier than the power they'd used to hide it. The mansion breathed differently after they were gone. Something loosened in the walls, something opened in the air. The cook, who had been slapped that same morning, sat down at the kitchen table and quietly allowed herself to cry. Not from pain this time, but from something that felt uncomfortably close to relief. Chike walked outside, into the garden, into the ordinary afternoon sunlight that somehow looked different from how it had looked 2 hours ago. He found Amaka near the side entrance, where she had been standing quietly since everything unraveled, uncertain whether to go or stay. He stopped in front of her. "You know," he said, "I've had advisors who told me to be careful, friends who hinted at things they were too polite to say directly, a mentor who watched and waited, but it took one quiet girl, one single act of courage to make everything visible." Amaka looked at him. "I didn't do it for you," she said simply. "I did it for myself and for my mother, and maybe for every person in this house who deserved better than what they were getting." Chike nodded, slowly. "I know," he said. "That's exactly what makes it remarkable." There is a particular kind of bravery that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with armor. It doesn't come with a plan. It comes from somewhere deeper, from a place in a person that has decided, quietly and absolutely, that there is a line that will not be crossed. Amaka did not come to that mansion to change anything. She came to earn money for her mother's hospital bills. She came with a small bag and a simple promise she had made to herself. But sometimes, not often, but sometimes, the right person in the right moment is enough to shift the entire weight of a situation. Amaka, Samuel's sister, had waited years for justice. She had waited through Samuel's grief and through Samuel's searching and through every moment he had nearly given up. And she had gotten it. Not through noise, not through someone powerful deciding to be kind, through a girl who caught a wrist in the air and held it steady. And Chike had been one signature away from the worst decision of his life, one ceremony away from handing everything he had built to someone who had measured it before she even walked through his door. He had been saved, not by a lawyer, not by an investigation, by a maid with a mother in the hospital and a spine made of something the world had been trying to bend for years. Never underestimate quiet people. Never confuse a person's gentleness for weakness. And never, never mistake someone's patience for permission. Because one day, they will raise their hand and another hand will catch it and everything will change. If this story moved you,
share it with someone who needs to hear it, and I'll see you in the next tale. Subscribe to Tales by RM and turn on your notifications. Every week, a new story that will stay with you long after the screen goes dark. Leave a comment below. What was the moment that hit you the hardest? And would you have done what Amaka did?